Truth Talks. Please, I'm excited about the Truth Talks. They are addressing true fellowship and what it means, what true fellowship and corporate worship looks like according to the Bible.
I will sing to the old rugged cross, and exchange it someday for a crown.
Good evening.
Evening.
How y'all doing? How y'all doing? It brings me so much pleasure and joy to be back here today to wrap up kind of like a bittersweet because I've been enjoying your company and y'all have propelled me through the scriptures in so many different ways, not just in Samuel. I tell you today I was reviewing the chapters and it led me into like a wild tangent to a point where I was in a book of Enoch, looking up and getting a further understanding of what some things meant. Not that I'm going to get in depth in them, but I love the fact that I get to do this with you guys. And hopefully when you're reading the information, it's making you go and search other things in the scriptures. Like you may see things that the world might tell you that are contradictory as to where when we get to chapter, I believe it's 23, the very first verse of 23, where, correct me if I'm wrong, it might be 23 or 24. My mom might be slipping, even though I got it right here. I just didn't want to. All right, so 24. And the reason why it said here, it's the first opening chapter, and the displeasure of God burned against David. But if you go to Chronicles, it says Satan. Now, that led me to, and I promise I'm gonna get to these because it's a lot of chapters, a lot of stuff we're gonna roll through. But that led me to think and look at, wow, was it Satan or was it God? And I said, well, God, I need an answer. Because if somebody was asking me this question, how would I answer? He said, well, go to Job. I said, Roger that. So that gave me a little bit more to think about. Now, was that a definitive answer that could answer you? You will come across these things in the scriptures where somebody might try and challenge you and say, hey, it's contradiction. It's not for you to go and say, well, let me defend this or let me defend that. It's for you to show them things where the scriptures are speaking. May seem like it's a little cloudy here, cloudy there, but when you put it all together, you get a clear picture. So when David, and I say that because as you go to Chronicles and you start to study Chronicles, you'll see a lot of parallels. And these could have came from different writers, different ways of how they had the conversation. But they're all were the same, the deceiver coming in, putting that into David's mouth. So let's get into the text. I'm probably stay really close to the text today because there is a lot. Has anybody read ahead? Oh my goodness. 19. When I was studying 19, I literally could have just stopped right there and said, hey, this is probably as far as we're going to make it for this particular Bible study night because there's a lot. There's Joab. There's the tribes. There's the people. There's David's return. There's the sitting at the gate. There's people that come out to apologize that, hey, David, we didn't know that you were going to be coming back. So I think we want to offer up apology. There's people on David's team who say, hey, why should we take these apologies? We should just slaughter them. There is deception all throughout what's been happening to David, and it was prophesied by who? Who came up and told David that his house was David? Because his house is going to be in turmoil. He came and told them through, say again? Nathan. All the things that David did, he told him, hey, what you did, this is going to happen to you. So none of this is a surprise to David. And if you notice how he's carrying in the last chapter as he was walking out and everybody was cursing him and everything, he said what? This is from who? God. So David is keeping his mindset in all of his steps. People who are betraying him, people who are coming out confessing. He's saying it doesn't matter. You are just like help me with his name here. Shemai. Let's just get to it. Let's just say the name. Shemil. There you go. As he came out, and he bashed David in the beginning, and I'm gonna be putting these things in order now. Mind you, I still have to say these names a million times, even though listening to them audio, because I want to say them how they're meant to be said, because names and words matter. So I try to get them right, but I haven't always been the best when it comes to names. because I get a lot of names that came across me in my life. So as he cursed David in the last chapter, David said, hey, it's okay. He can curse me. As Joab killed his son, he said, hey, it's okay. These are things that has to take place. David understood that the walk that he was on, everything that had to take place. So when the people are returning, guess what? That has to take place too, because David understood that, hey, if I don't forgive Shimei, then is Israel now in turmoil? Because now I basically have somebody else. If I don't take care of these problems that are presented before me, when he brings in the tribes, or there are other people, we'll see as we go in chapter, other people to say, hey, I don't want to follow David. He says, I'm not going to make the same mistake that I made with Absalom. I'm going to snuff this one out right away. As we see, Joab is really starting to kind of like, hey, David, you might not be the guy that I want to listen to all the time. I might want to make decisions on my own. So we see David actually, almost in the sense, trying to stop turmoil that was naturally supposed to happen so that it could happen the way it was supposed to for us. Everything is pre-ordered. So we're going to start at the top of 19. All right, so at the top of 19, remember I told you, Joab is not really too happy with David, especially after killing Absalom. He comes back and he actually says something to David that kind of made David have to really think. He said, David, you sit here and you weep at the gate for Absalom. You are breaking down for him. But what about everybody else? What about all the people that did follow you, all the people that did believe you, all the people that wanted to be there? Now, I've heard since joining the Firm Foundation, it says, hey, who is the person that's probably the elect or the people who say, hey, how did you, how is it fair for everybody to have this option? Ain't that what you say, Pastor Ken? That the elect is actually unfair for us that.
Because they might get injustice, they get frustrated.
And you see right there, Joab is kind of saying something very similar. He like, hey, these people over here. But David still remembers what made him the king after God's own heart. And that was, if it's one, that's the one that I'm going to cry over. That's the one that I'm going to chase. That's the one I'm going to mourn. Because I have the other 99. In a sense, he had all the other tribes. Even when all the people were coming back and his own men were saying, why are you doing? He said, is this day not? I'm the king? Like, I'm okay with everything that's taking place. I don't need you to keep trying to heap on more stuff. But Joab was making sense. So what did David do? He went and addressed the people. And as he addressed the people, we saw division because his own kinsmen weren't there. How do you address the people, David, and your own people aren't there? Well, David said, well, let's get some messages out to people. The people of Israel said, well, we might want to think about this a little bit. And they went back into their tents and they talked amongst themselves, amongst the tribes. And they eventually said, you know what? Hey, we seen what David did when he brought us out and he fought against the Philistines. That was great. We loved him then. We seen him with how he acted wisely when he was on the move and on the run in so many countless battles. We loved him then. But then Absalom came. And we loved Absalom too. And when we loved Absalom, we made him king. We never stopped making David king, but he was on the run. But now we got to go back in and welcome David back into the gate. Now, that showed you the heart of the people. Whatever the wind blew, those people kind of went to it. So if David would have just said, hey, these people are finicky, he would have probably wiped out half of Israel because they were so, well, not so much wishy-washy. I said that at first too. I really did. I said wishy-washy. These are wishy-washy people. But then I thought, these are people who got exactly what they asked for. A king. Let's not forget how this all started. Because they requested a king. And just like when they requested a king and they didn't know what their request was, they didn't understand the ramifications that go along with that type of request. You asked for this. I always go back. So I don't call them wishy-washy. I call them type people that got exactly what they asked for. And sometimes that does look wishy-washy. So David finally makes peace with the children of Israel. They say, okay, we agree. As they agree, they're like, all right, well, we got to get ready to start bringing things back across, get us back into the kingdom. And David says, well, what about my family? The people that are flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone, my kinfolk. How dare they not come out and greet me? I'm coming back home. So the word got out there. He said, let's get into the text here. So David sent Zadok to an Abiathar, the priest, to speak to the elders of Jews, and this is 2 Samuel 19:11. I got it. Why are you the last to bring the sovereign back to his house, since the word of Israel has come to the sovereign to his house? Meaning Israel has already accepted. What's taking you so long? What also do we see right here that's going to become a problem with Israel? Infighting. We see division. It's already 10 tribes. The 10 tribes, when they say, hey, well, bring them back in, the 10 tribes already had their comments, their concerns, their thoughts about, like, hey, how do you get 100% portion of David? And they're like, David is my flesh, my blood. He's from Jesse. He's one of us. And their words were really harsh to them because it's basically saying David is more family to me than to you. And they took offense to that. And you could see the division start there. But it was also division by who David was allowing back into his house. People were questioning all of his choices. Every way these people treat you, and yet you bring them back in. So speaking of Shemaiah, say that right? Benjamin. He was the one. He came down, and I'm breaking these people down individually because collectively they make up who David is. He came down. He said, "Hey, David, I acted so wicked and crooked. Don't pardon my crookedness today. Forgive what I did to you while you was out there." And you know what David said? Okay. But then, because it's a lot going on just here. Okay. Now they slipped. If you go to 17. They slipped Ziba in there. Now, remember what Ziba did when everything was going bad, right? Ziba saddled up the donkey. He told Mephibosheth, hey, stick back, man. I'm going to go for it and tell David that everything's going to be okay and you're going to rest here. But Mephibosheth's whole plot and plan, Ziba's whole plot and plan was to make Mephibosheth look like he was staying back to take over Saul. So Ziba hurried up and crossed that river really quick and tried to gain favor in David's eyes by bringing all his people over. Because remember, Ziba is a man of what? Wealth. It wasn't that he didn't have. Before they came to Mephibosheth, he had sons, he had servants. So he wanted to retain that. He wanted it. Remember, the land was split between, well, it was given to Mephibosheth, but they worked it. So Ziba gets across the water. Mephibosheth's like, hey, wait a minute. What about me, David? The whole time you were gone, I didn't shave, I didn't trim my nails, I didn't do anything to my feet. I basically stayed in the state that you left me until you returned, to show you that I was here waiting for you. David said, well, Mephibosheth, I know you didn't come out there to greet me, and I hear your reasons. Don't worry about it. Because he said it right then and there to Zariah. Am I not the king? Can I not make these decisions to show mercy versus slaughter? So that was the real crux of 19, the infighting, the people coming back for forgiveness. David making kingly decisions. David making choices about the people, because David understood how tender and fractured Israel was. And the fighting wasn't done. Is there anything else that y'all want to pull out of 19? Like I said, this is going to be really quick because it's a lot. It is like these last 4 chapters, you would have thought that they were really, well, when God was pinning it, he's putting a lot of information in there that you can go and take each individual interaction and glean from it and get understanding about yourself and the sovereignty of God. What you got, brother?
Like they had, some of them had shown allegiance to Absalom instead of David, right? They didn't, that was one of their issues. We're now, Absalom's dead now. We had showed allegiance to him and really turned our back against the true king, right? There's a lot of Israel. Well, it's the same thing. The Lord was their true king. And yet they had turned their back on him and asked for a false king, quote unquote, someone that would do what they wanted. And I think that's, people tend to show allegiance to people while it is convenient for them. So I think just like they rejected, David was the true king of Israel, and yet they had showed allegiance to Absalom. Well, the Lord Jesus Christ is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and people tend to turn their back and lean towards false kings too.
People who can't save them, right? Because each king that they relied on failed them, even David. David's kingdom was in turmoil. David was obedient to God until he wasn't. David had a lot of things going on. This was never to say that David was a great king. He was, in a sense of what he was in the line of what we needed. But David was an example to Israel. I can give you the best of the best, which you think is the worst of the worst. Because remember, David was the youngest out of his father's children. I can give you the best of the best out of the worst and the worst, but yet it's still not me. It's still not what you truly need. And as we get into the two Psalms that David penned, you hear David talks about his own inadequacies. You hear him talk about the only person that can save me. Yes, he talks about crushing his enemies, but as I read him, I thought, really, man, David says words like deliverance, savior, several times in both of those. And it really made me dig into just those two words, you know, and we'll get to that. Not going to jump ahead too far, but we'll get to that. So afterwards, like I said, Israel, I'll read from 19 where Judah is talking to Israel or communicating between the tribal leaders, because that's how they talked. That's how they communicated. It wasn't just like they went back. These are, yes.
No, you getting ready to get into 42, all right?
Right.
Okay, because that shows you the entire chapter, how everything came about. Go ahead.
So and I guess we're going to go to 2 Samuel 19.
No.
Chapter 42.
Wherever you want to go.
Good. That's the perfect. In fact, I got that highlighted.
Okay.
That's where we start. You help me out. See, that's why I like Air Firm Foundation. I don't have to be the only one, because it's a lot of great knowledge in this room. It's a lot of people studying scriptures, and it's the best way, because that way you don't learn on your own. And I'm reading 2 Samuel 19, chapter 42.
Verse 42.
Verse 42. Ooh, thank you. I still get that. And all the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, because the king is our relative. And why are you displeased over this matter? Question mark. Have we all eaten at the sovereign's cost? Question mark. Or has he given us any gifts? Meaning, hey, he's family. You know, we're not doing this for favor. Everybody else is coming out this is our family. He called us. And he was right, and it was right for him to call us. You know, because one cry was, go back to people who previously loved you as a king, then didn't. Then when they needed a king because of the vacancy, they loved you again. Or do you go back to your family? David called his family particularly, and he even offered position. He said, if you come, specifically, as we get into the next chapter, if you come, Amasa. Got that one right. That was an easy one. A lot of A's, M's, and S's. He said, Amasa, if you come, my kin, I'll put you over the army that Joab has. Now, that was a death sentence. Because Joab is stabby right now. Anybody who he feels. Now, I think in Joab's mind, he's protecting the kingdom as much as possible. He starts to see it and says to himself that David's wisdom can't be right, because everybody he's putting in charge, I got to kill him. Or if you come against David, I got to kill you. Absalom did not have a problem slaughtering. So in chapter 20, after the Israelites and Judah had their conversation, which was heated, because it actually said, and I'll read the last verse, you don't have to go back, in 43, and the men of Israel answered the men of Judah and said, we have 10 parts in the sovereign, meaning as a kingdom, we have 10 votes. If we throw our shoe in a circle and all 10 shoes are in there, then I guess we got to pay less. But at the end of the day, we have 10 votes right here. I know that was an old joke, pay less shoes. Aging myself. All right. Huh? All right. So he said, hey, we got 10 parts in David too. We have more than you. You're just Judah. Why did you despise us? Why not our advice first to bring back the servants, but the word of Judah? Now, because David said, for the same reason I just gave you. Yeah, man, you guys are wishy-washy, needs a family. Simple enough. To not dig into it too much, but because I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, because I think that message is loud and clear. Because we will see Judah and Israel divide. And when it comes to divide, we see that division starts, probably started a while back, but we see a lot of it right here. and the kinglyship and the rule, because as you get into the next books of the Bible, if you continue on, you'll start to see how the kings conducted themselves. You'll start to see how some kings in Israel were good and then some were just all the way wicked. You'll see how some kings in in the line of Judah was good. Some were all the way wicked. It happens on both sides of the table. All right. And I tell you that to say here is where we see. Because if you get to chapter 20, we already see people, men, leaders who followed David and his clan and said, you know what? We don't want to do it no more. We renounce David. And that renouncing comes with a very harsh renouncing. Because it says, and there came to be men of Baliel, whose name was Sheba, son of Bekra, a Benjamite. And he blew with a shofar and said, listen, anytime somebody blew a shofar or horn, that was a battle cry. It wasn't a declaration like, let me blow a horn so everybody listen up. It was a battle cry. So when he blew that horn, he said that we are at war. This tribe of Israel, and it's Benjamin popping up again, huh? And why is Benjamin popping up again? Because who was from Benjamin? Oh, so all people are still a little hot about this. All right, they still hot. The Benjamites are still upset. And he blew a shofar and he says, we have no part in David, nor do we have inheritance of the son of Jesse, each one to his own tent, O Israel. That's it. Yes, ma'am.
Reading that, I guess don't they realize that not only are they going against David, but they're going against the Lord.
Well, whether they realize it or not, that declaration, they made it. And I will hope, out of sight. To them, they didn't understand God. They knew that David, the man, was king. No matter what was being said or what was being preached about the land or how many of the prophets, because remember, the Benjamites are what? Israeli, right? In fact, the town that the Benjamites scurried off and hurried to was an Israeli town, right? Because the lady, the wise woman came out and told them what? She said, why would you wipe us off the earth from the inheritance of Israel? Huh? Don't worry about it. We'll get there. So let's before this, we have a new problem. We have someone else that has raised up and ready to start a war with David. But David said, nope, not this time. We're gonna nip this one in the bud. Amasa, gather up the troops, chase him down. Take Joab. And they said, we ride. And they rode after him. And they chased him down. And as they chased him down, they got to a place where it's like a side of the road. All right. And this side of the road, let's say it's a traveling road where everyone is going past and people are seeing. And Joab said, all right, this is my chance. This is my chance because David has already said he's going to sit him over me. If this man comes back successful, it's pretty much a done deal. So he pulled his beard as if to lean in to give him a kiss. And he gutted that man right there on the road. Joab was a man of decision. You see what he wanted, and he saw what he wanted, and he took the chance. It was so bad as because remember, he didn't die right away. He was laying on the ground bleeding out. And everybody would just, man, that's David's kinfolk. That's his family. That's his family right there. Joab has killed another member of David's family. Now, who is Joab? Isn't he related to David too? Huh?
Boom coon.
Yeah, but he's related to him. Ain't that his brother's, his father's brother's son? Man, so this guy's killing his own family. He's killing the people of Israel, the opposite of what David said that he would do. So they go. So eventually they say, well, Joab says, this is just too much for everybody to see. Drag him off to the side, throw a cloth on, we got something to do. And they continue to march, and they get to the city, and a wise woman comes out. And it's always a wise woman that comes out. It's always a wise woman. And they said they went to besiege Abel of Beth Micaiah.
Where you at?
Yeah, Beth Micaiah. Well,
Beth.
and I apologize. Sometimes when I'm studying, I study from the scriptures that I have, and it makes it hard when I'm trying to translate over. So please forgive me. I'm working my best to say it without saying it here. And they cast the siege mountain. They went up to the city and it stood. They were ready to go. And then a wise woman. It says if you go to 2 Samuel 20:16.
Mm-hmm.
Then a wise woman called out from the city. Listen, listen, please, to Joab. Come nearby so I may speak to you. And Joab comes and he leans in and he said, hey, you want to come in here and destroy the whole inheritance, everything that I got, everything that's here for us, the people? And he said it twice because Joab's reply to her was what? I'm listening. But when she said about the inheritance, taking her from the inheritance of God, Joab said, far be it.
Verse
Then he
20.
reiterated, this is verse 20.
Mm-hmm.
He said, far be it. And then he repeated it, far be it. Because he didn't want to come in there and destroy the city. So now we see a different side of Joab. It's still the same Joab that stabbed that man on the side of the road. So she said, hey, look, what is it will stop you from coming in this city? Turn down. Said, give me the head of Shippa. She said, no problem. By the end of the night, they threw their head over the wall. And the wrath was the wrath was stayed, right?
Mm-hmm.
All done. They go back. And now, as they go back, it's all said and done. They start to describe the mighty men of David. Hold on. Go ahead. Anybody got something else? Because I'm getting ready. I'm kind of rolling.
23.
What you got?
They cut off the head of Sheba.
Oh, that's up there in 21.
Okay. So I was thinking, Petey, as I'm reading this part, Sheba probably thought he was safe within the walls of that city. But no one is safe, I feel like, when they run against God's will. There isn't a wall high enough, right, or strong enough to protect against God's will. And I feel like on the spiritual side, God is really, man can't hide. And it's the sin. It's not the person. They cut his head off. But it's the sin that if people want to hold on to their sin, that's the real issue. Not to spiritualize the text, but this man is thinking he's safe. And a lot of people think they're safe and they're in a situation of sin. And that's what God is after. That's what can't be in his presence. So I like to see that every man's, heart is like a city. Like we don't know what's locked up in a man's heart, but God does know, and man can't hide.
Can't hide.
See, find you.
If he coming for your head, just imagine it's gonna be lopped off and threw across the gate. And it was also smart. All right, so this man had made a decree that he wanted nothing to do with Jesse, nothing to do with the inheritance. So this woman also understood that same decree that Sheba made. You don't want any of the inheritance. You don't want any of this. So therefore, you are an enemy to the city, and chopping your head off is easy to do. She made that decision in less than 2 sentences. She told him by the evening, you'll have it, right? I believe that was her words. And if she wasn't a woman of word, but also with the mission being successful, Joab went back and he took over all the army of Israel. We see how the plot thickens. Joab is now sitting in the seat of power. If you go down to same chapter, verse 23. After Joab's returned to her, it says, now Joab was over all the armies of Israel, and Benihana, the son of Jehoiada, was over the Keretite and the Philites, and Adoram was over the compulsory labor in Jehoshaphat. So Joab is setting up things. But if you go to the very next chapter, all right, 21, we'll see David's numbering of the people. Now, y'all remember when I said if you go to Chronicle, they talk about this numbering of the people a little bit more in depth. I gave y'all the verses last time I was here. Now I'm going to dig it, but this numbering of the people was a big offense to God. All right, and as he numbered the people, we had scarcity in the land. All right, well, it's 2. This is where the 3 years of scarcity come from. It doesn't say it here, but he numbered the people. So David was okay with going out and saying, let me count the people. Let me count how many people I have. It was never for him to do that because they were never his people. For him to have that knowledge means that now you're trying to dig into what God knows. But they get the scarcity of the land came. And the reason why I'm telling you, because as you study these and you put them together, you will see some things you're like, wow, that seems like out of order. Did David do this twice? No, this is all concurrent. These are all things that roll together. So this famine came. And when the famine came, he said, well, this must be the answer to the famine. It's been famine 3 years. What's the problem? So the prophet came and he told him, or the seer, and he said, hey, this is the reason. Because Saul said so many blood out there, he said, whoo, that wasn't me this time. This famine's not on me. He said, because Saul said so many blood out there, but that has to be paid for. He said, okay, how do we go? He said, go see the Gadites, because Saul was trying to wipe them off the earth. I mean, the Gibeonites, I'm sorry. So Saul was trying to wipe them off the earth. Go see what their request is, and that will help the famine in the land. Whew, okay, bet that works. So he goes and he asks me, he said, what is it you request of me that I do to take away this famine in the land? I said, oh, well, you remember Saul? Yeah, I remember Saul. Remember what he did? Yeah. Well, we want seven of his sons. Remember, God's word said that he was going to take out that line, that lineage. Still going on. So David goes, he said, well, I can't give you Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth has been spared more times because of Jonathan than you could shake a stick at. Mephibosheth's life has been on the line so many times, but because David's love for Jonathan, he listens, he hears, he has compassion for Mephibosheth to the point where he knows he has to give up 7 lives. And he makes the call, but he said, I'm not going to do that for Mephibosheth. So he gives up the seven, and in the text it tells you exactly. He gives up this 7 sons. Now, I'll read exactly the request and with David. I'm gonna read from 21, 1 through 4. And there was scarcity and food in the days of David for 3 years, year after year. And David sought the face of God, and God answered, because Saul and his bloodthirsty house, because he killed the Gibeonites. The king therefore called the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not children of Israel, but they were a remnant of the Amorites. Now, people say, hey, and I take a pause there, because why is the Amorites sojourning amongst the people? Because that was a practice. Wasn't always the thing to do, but as sometimes conquest went, they would say, hey, these people aren't meant to be wiped away. They're going to sojourn with you and come in and follow your laws and traditions. Which when the Benjamites was doing it, they brought them in. We're not children of Israel, but the remnants of Amorites. The children of Israel has sworn to protect them, but Saul sought to strike them, once again breaking a rule. So David said to the Gibeonites, and here we go, what should I do to make an atonement so that you bless the inheritance of God? And the Gibeonites told him, it's not a matter of money between me and Saul's house. Neither is it for us to put to death any man in Israel. This is not a beef towards Israel. This is strictly because of Saul. And whatever you say, I do. And that's when they put the request in for the 7. Now, there was still remnants of Saul's house. They brought him out. They gave him to the men of the Gibeonites. And they hung him there at the gate. But one of Saul's concubines, where was that? I like to get to the names. Ritzvah, she felt remorse. She felt sad because they took her sons. So what she did is she spread out a sackcloth, basically a black potato sack dipped in ash, and she laid there. And she fought off the birds and the beasts of the lands until the first raindrop came, because this was during the barley season. They were waiting for that. So the rain came, the harvest came. So David had his remorse, and he went and he collected the bodies of the 7 men. He went back and got Saul and Jonathan's bones from where they rested, brought them back, and gave them a proper king's burial for all of Israel to see. Once again, David wasn't spiteful. He could have left them bodies there to burn. He could have do whatever. He could have done, because these were people of his enemy. To treat them so kindly, even though he had to do what he had to do according to the word of God, he still tended them kindly after their afterlife. These are the closing chapters. David is doing housekeeping. The people around him, things are kind of shaking in Israel, but David is still trying to be the king that they need. the king that he know he can be. And also, while David is still trying to get his kingdom together, the Philistines are not letting up. They are not letting up. They are tough. So guess what David does? The one thing he wanted to do probably when he was on a run. David said, it's time for me to fight. And not only am I going to fight, I'm going to let the dogs off the leash because they have been, held back for a long time. It's time to get busy. It's time to start slaughtering these guys and put them under the ban. In other words, put them to a point where they're under our foot and they no longer are willing to fight and move. So David had 3 mighty men. All right. And these 3 mighty men were mightier than the others. If you go, once again, I'm going to keep saying, you got to go to Chronicles because Chronicles detail these fights to let you know when David said these 3 mighty men were no joke, they were no joke. 800, 300. When you put them out there, they'll slaughter them. And sometimes they went up against other people with far less. Oh, you come with a sword, I got this staff. You come with a spear, I got this staff. You come whatever, I got this staff, and I will bust you in your head, take your spear, and run you through. Because these men were men of battle. So this whole time that David has been staying in, don't kill this person. It wasn't because they lacked the capability. In fact, they were warriors, just like David. His left and his right hand men were fighters just like him. So we go down, if we go down to because I don't want to miss it. Go to 21:15. Thank you very much. But even though David has warriors around him, David is tired too. He's getting old. All right. So David is still going out. And the reason why I'm telling you all these stories as you read them with the mind of going together, putting things in order, you'll see that David was out there with his men now. He's out there on the battlefield, but David is tired. He don't have that same fight in him. And as he was getting ready to get struck down by one of the Philistines, one of his mighty men stepped up, and they took care of business. They slaughtered that Philistine. And as you go on, they said, David, we can't have you continuously coming out here on the battlefield. Because if you die in the midst of all of this, then Israel goes with you. The light of Israel will be extinguished. You can no longer go out. So those mighty men were ready to step up. And unlike Joab, they were doing it according to what David said to do. Well, while David was out on the battlefield, hold on, because I don't want to get in. Okay. While David was out on the battlefield and was fighting Philistines, there were still some remnants, either relatives of Goliath, sons, whatever. And they still had a beef and a grudge against David. But his men said, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. They struck him. It was 4 of them. They put them all down. Weavers, beams, spears. These men were fighters. And it was basically the same thing that David did, just on a smaller scale with Goliath. They were fighters. They were warriors. I'm not going to, is there anything that y'all want to add to that or things you may have put it out? Because the descriptions of some of these men could have been, it goes to tell you that 6 fingers on each hand. And they got 20. Can you imagine coming to big hands? They're already giants. Left over from remnants of. Say again. Say it out.
Yes.
Reference left over from the days of giants. Now, some people argue and say, hey, they were just really big men. Okay, if that's what you want to say. But their descriptions make them giants to me because, tall people nowadays, really tall people look giant to me, to a short person or to myself. And when I say giant, that's just big. But that's not the description they give of these mighty men. They don't give a description of just a tall person. They give a description of a giant, someone that towers over his foes, one that could crush a head with their hands. These are giants. So I want this to be understood because hopefully I can make it with some time. We're going to talk about what David says and how he describes his battles, and you'll see these giants, these fights, they didn't just come because the men had strength. The men had faith. The men had belief. The men were warriors, yes, but their strength came from God. Deliverance, Savior, salvation. You'll hear it. Hey, the spear was in my hand, but I had the strength of God to run through my enemy. They know that. Yes, sir.
What God wanted to them to realize and not numbering the people. You know, because when they started numbering the people, then they were saying it depends on the size of my army if I can win this war or not. You know, so if you took that from Gideon, you know, he's sizing down to so many people. So here David numbers the people, and that was a sin against God. Sign of trusting his own strength, the strength of his own.
Numbering the people was never for David to do. David did not need to know how many people there was in God's army. That was a failure on David's behalf. So once again, we see that he wasn't perfect, but he was the king we needed. He was the one that was leading Israel in peace when he was told to be in peace, and he drew a sword when he needed to draw a sword. Good night. Yeah, we wrapping it up really good here. They all five out of the hands of David and his servant. And then David, in chapter 22, and it says, and David spoke, at the very chapter 1, then David spoke the words of this song on the day when when God had delivered him from the hands of all his enemies and from Saul. Now, David is at peace. Well, what David's version of peace is, right? All his enemies are gone. The hand of Saul is gone. So David is now, he doesn't have rest, but he has peace around him. All right. Anybody, just one person, because I wanna read with that person. Psalms 18.
Which one you looking for? 18 itself?
18 itself as a whole. Oh no, not 18.
91.
Mm-mm.
Let's find it. Yeah, Psalm
Yep,
18.
Psalm 18. All right. So David was a psalmist. All right. We'll see a little bit of that as it comes to the end of. David was a psalmist, and the reason why I wanted you to turn to Psalms 18, if you didn't, just make a note of it. Psalms 18, and what David's word was so inspired that the psalmist said, "We will add this," because David speaks of deliverance. David speaks of the defeat of his enemy. David speaks of not of his own doing, but through the deliverance of God. David in this psalm right here speaks of how he had no victory, and it was only God that could bring him through. This is a really long.
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 22,
It's the same.
Second Samuel, and then Psalms 18 is the same song.
Same song.
Yes.
I wanted to point that out to you, that what David is saying is important enough that it made it into the psalmist text. That's all. I wanted to show it to you, because if I would have just said it, people would say, "Hey, you got to show it to me." So therefore, I defeated the second part.
Let's see.
Read a verse over here, and I can read a verse on those.
You know what? You would think that I called you and asked you, and I tell the truth. I thought about that. I really did. But do you know, as I tried to line it up to not cause confusion, the beginning of Psalm 18 starts different than when David started. So could we start at the same place?
You want
Well,
to read it out of yours?
yeah, I'll switch it over.
No, I just asked the question.
Yeah.
Okay. You got Psalms 18, Kenneth?
What verse you want to start at?
You're gonna start at verse 2?
We can start. Verse 2.
Well,
Mhm.
actually, yeah, verse 2.
Verse
What verse you gonna start at in Samuel?
Verse 2.
Okay, you wanna go first, read your verse, and I read mine?
Okay.
Yeah, I like this. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I'll go ahead.
I'm here for it. Because can I interject in certain place? Oh, awesome. Oh, okay, awesome.
On the way.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Oh man, this is
Okay,
gonna be fun.
Samuel 22, verse 2. And he said, "The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverance."
Stop there for 2 seconds. All right. The Lord is my rock and my deliverance. So in my studies, remember I told you when I study, sometimes I get into places where it kind of takes me and I have questions. And I've read in places and it'll take me forever to kind of thumb through everything. We're talking about hours, you know, those who have labored to deliver a message. Sometimes you got to say, well, let me hit Google up real quick and make sure, or get in line, because if I have to go and hit a tick mark, I might be here, and I want to make sure that this point that just jumped in my head was something worth sharing. So whew, I was going over a lot today, so I'm backtracking here. Please.
The Lord is my rock and my deliverance, or fortress, and my deliverance.
All right. So I went and I said, how many times is deliverance talked about in Samuel, like book 1 and 2? So you got 7, 12, and then you get another 6 in the second book. And when I say deliverance, I'm not talking about, hey, you know, I'm talking about true deliverance. When you think of, there was no other way but God's salvation. And then said, well, David was very specific about deliverance. And I was reading one of my other texts, and I said, well, why does it say here deliverance and some texts say salvation? And then I realized those are two of the same words. I said, well, what are the words? I said, well, I don't speak Greek and Hebrew. I got to go dig a little bit more. This is not a lesson that me trying to teach you about Greek and Hebrew. What I'm trying to say is David has been calling on Christ, or as we know it, Jesus, the rock, throughout the whole time. And I say that because when David would say, hey, I call on salvation or deliverance, there were two words. They were Hebrew words. It was Yeheshu or Teheshu, depending on which one. But the majority of the one that they call, because deliverance started with a T, salvation started with a Y. I said, wow. So David, in the old text, when they would put it, has been saying that I call on Yeshua for salvation. Or he would say, I call on Yeshua. Can you read that one more time for me, that particular text?
The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer.
Right. And it also said, my fortress, my deliverer, my rock, my El. I take refuge in. Now that's deliverer. It says, my shield and the horn of my deliverance.
Verse 3.
Right there, the horn of my deliverance. That word I said, why deliverance? And then if you go, we'll get to the next one, because he has another sound where it says salvation, but it's in the same text, which that led me to think. So if you go back and look at all of those times where David is talking about salvation and deliverance, he's literally talking about being saved through no other means besides God. We'll see that. I wanted to point that out for you, because David opens up telling us about his rock and his deliverance, his Yeshua. Now, when you translate the word and you get to where we're at, he said, Jesus. All right, let's go. Please do.
The word fortress, or the word rock, you know, it speaks of a hiding place as well. I think somewhere in the song it talks about the badger. You know, how he be right there and you wouldn't even see it. You know, so the Lord was David's hiding place as well.
Please. So y'all ready? I stopped y'all. It was getting good.
I'm trying to flush it out.
No, don't flush it out. I ain't gonna. The second we'll see it again. So go ahead. Let's continue.
Who's going, me or him?
We're on 2.
We're on 2. I'm on verse 3.
All right, you're on 3. You got to finish 2.
He finished 2.
He got to finish 2.
Yeah.
We got it. We got it. You got to finish 2.
Okay. My shield and the horn of my salvation and my stronghold.
Now you said, man, you keep making me have to start over again. You said salvation right there. My text say deliverance. What yours say?
It said, the God of my strength, in whom I will trust, my shield and my horn of my salvation.
Salvation. So what I tried to explain earlier, and I knew this because trust me, when I pull up the text, I pull them all up, and I pull them up from each version of each Bible I got. Sometimes they be up there in old Hebrew, and I'm like, I can't read that. That's just too far for me to go. But as I pull them up and compare the text, I said this word means the same thing in all the different texts. I don't care how they translate it. We're talking about pure salvation. But go ahead. Because
I don't mean to get into Hebrew.
Oh, come on. Bible study.
I can't help but my man got his Hebrew Bible right.
Okay.
Thank you, Bruce.
The The word horn here, remember when, Isaac took his son up and the ram was caught in the thicket by his horns? And the horns represent strength.
Mhm.
Okay, and there was no way that that bush could have held that ram there. Okay, so it's actually the Lord retaining that. But in Isaiah, it says, "Who have known the arm of the Lord?" And that word arm means is the Zeroha. It means the strength of the Lord. So when we read here, it says, "My share and the horn of my salvation," it's the strength of my salvation it's talking about.
Mhm.
So these songs not just some pretty to read. They're actually telling the attributes of the Lord.
Yes, definitely.
We see God in the doctrines. We see him in the scripture.
He's in there. And that is the point. I wanted to point out, you know, that David is telling of his communication, of his interaction with the strength of God. How
Horns represent strength.
I,
You know, in Bible.
a horn is
No,
really,
the horn, the ram or horn.
Ram's horn.
Yeah.
that's why they made them out of the show part, because they were durable. If they fell onto the ground, it was something that and if got stepped on or trampled by horses. If a man came across, they were normally decorated, very pretty, or some of them were according to the tribes, whatever they may put on. If it fell to the ground and the horses trampled, because remember who all their enemies was, right? They were horse riders, fell to the ground, it was something that could be ran over, picked up, knocked the sand out, and blew, so everyone will know where the battle was taking place. Y'all remember the wall where it said, "Hey, if they come to y'all side, we fixing the wall." Later story. They come to y'all side of the wall, blow the horn. Come this side, blow the horn. Okay. All right. So that word is in there. I found it. That word salvation is in there. Between the two, it's that particular one. Salvation, the Hebrew word Yeshua and Teshuah, spelled the same way. One is deliverance and one is salvation. And it's mentioned 7 times. If you go back to in 1 Samuel chapter 11, verse 13, it speaks of specific salvation. 14:45, you want to write them down. You don't have to jump to them. 14 to 45, that also speaks of salvation. These are just 2 examples from there out of the 7. Deliverance, if you go to 1 Samuel 10 to 19 and 14 through 45, you want to take a look at those. That talks about deliverance, being brought out of something by divinity. 2 Samuel, here are another few examples. And the reason why I'm giving these examples, because this is almost over. I've had so much fun with you, and I kind of just don't want it to end. All right, in 2 Samuel, you have examples of it 4 times. There are 4 times where it mentioned 2 Samuel 3:18 and what we just talked about here in 21:51. If y'all two are reading the 2 different Psalms from 2 different places, you see that corresponds. All right, and then the deliverance, you hear it in 2 Samuel 8 through 6 and 10 and 11. All right, now it's back to the Psalms. You were finishing up 2. Let's just go to 3.
Well, I'll finish up 3. Well, it said, "The God of my strength, in whom I would trust, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold and my refuge, my Savior, you saved me from violence." In the verse 3.
And verse 3.
And my verse 3 says, "I call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemy."
Now, a lot of reasons, and because of that is because I want to make sure that we line up that when somebody say, "Well, this is there," you can show them, say, "Well, it's right here," and you can explain to them why the psalmist was wrote. You can explain to them the battles that psalm pertained to. Sometimes when you go into the Psalms, and this is something that my mom always taught me, she said the Psalms correspond with the scriptures, baby. You need to know which ones, which battles you're calling up. You know, because everybody will say, "Go read the 23rd Psalm," and may not understand the correlation what it is to where, how, what correspond. Go read the 51st Psalm. You need forgiveness. Yeah, because David needed forgiveness too, but you know, they send you to places so you should understand the psalmist and understand what's going on. I can't tell you what all 119 of them, no, 50, but if you got a different text, 151 tells you what they all link to. But as I study, and hopefully as you study, you'll start to see the Psalms line up too. We don't have to go through any more because what you got?
I would like to mention something with the Psalms. I know in this dispensation of the New Testament era, the church age, we have a song we sing, usually they're about the grace of God and the mercy of God and the love of God, which is true. But in the scriptures, we see that praises and songs to God is not only about God's grace and goodness, but it's like God's wrath. We see Moses saying that when they came across the part of the sea, we see in a lot of the battles with David, they sung songs to the Lord in reference to his wrath, his judgment, you know, and we don't hear of it. Yeah.
The Psalms were very important. You know, I didn't want to belabor the lesson about the Psalms, but I wanted to point out because in the very next verse, at the top of the chapter, it tells you that David was what? One of the best to do it. What do they call him? And these are the last words of David. This is verse 1, saying that the sayings of David, son of Jesse, the sayings of a man raised above. Now that's very raised above. Now remember, the word raised above, David could not raise himself up. So being raised above means that he had to be brought up. A man raised above, the anointed of God of Jacob, or Israel, and the sweet singer, or in some texts it might say psalmist of Israel. So David, when he spoke, having that sincerity with the Lord, he told his stories through song or poems, as we got them today, to talk about the sovereignty of the Lord, the deliverance of the Lord, salvation. He actually talks about his own depravity in there. David speaks a lot through these Psalms, and if you go to him and you say, well, I want to read this psalm for this, make sure you're looking at it from some of the same ways that David looked at it. See what psalm corresponds with his run through Israel, his time as a king, and you may get a better understanding of what he was dealing with and what you may be dealing with spiritually as you read that text. Not gonna get into it. All right. So David spoke these words, and I'll read them. Start at verse 2, 2 Samuel 23:2. The Spirit of God has spoken through me, and his words is my words on my tongue. The God of Israel said, the Rock of Israel spoke to me, one who rules over man righteously, who rules in the fear of God, is like the light of the morning when the sun rises, a morning without clouds, tender grass from the earth, from sunshine, from rain. For is it not my house so with God? For he has made an everlasting covenant with me, ordering in all matters and guarded for all my deliverance and desires. Shall he not make it send forth a branch? But the worthless are thorns to be thrust away, for they are not to be taken with hand. But the man who touches them uses iron or shafts of spear. With the fire, they are burnt up in their place. Right there. You see what David is talking about? He's talking about the promise that God made him. He understands it's not going to be him, but a branch from him, something extending from his lineage, just that righteousness, this man is going to come and judge. He's reminding them that, hey, this is the promise made to me. This is the promise that was made to me, and I'm telling you from my mouth because God has put it there to say so. We see it's coming. I'm warning you. I'm telling you that this is what's coming. And then David goes on to list his mighty men. And as he lists his mighty men, David gets thirsty. Well, the listing of the mighty men already happened via scripture, but David gets thirsty as the mighty men. I got kind of thirsty reading all the names and everything they did. But David tells them, man, I'm really thirsty. Now, this is in the midst of some fight with the Philistines because we ain't put them all the way down yet. And those men looked at David and they say, yep, I'm going to jump over, run to the well in Bethlehem, get you some water and bring it back. And they did just that. Now, I watch a lot of TV, as we all know. And there's this movie called Saving Private Ryan. How many people seen Saving Private Ryan? Mm-hmm. One of the best scenes, if you got, is huh? They talk about leadership in there. I used to show this to my guys for leadership to give them examples of good and bad leaders. On one of the scenes, there was a scene where all the guys of Easy Company was getting bombarded with shells. And one of their leaders was sitting there crying, and they was like, hey, we can't stay here. We have to do something. I'm not telling you that this is what David guy's doing. I'm telling you what they ran through. Now, gunfire is going by this guy's, bullets is whizzing, everything. One of the guys said the only way that we can get this message over here is somebody make a beeline straight. Before it's done, one of the leaders, one of the guys that they really put all their pride in and wanted to follow, he jumped up and he ran across the thing, sent the message, stood in there, looked around and ran back. I say that because these men probably had the same look as David's mighty men ran through the camp. Imagine all of you are Philistines. I'm not saying you are, but just use your imagination for me just for a bit. And I'm here, and I come out the door, and all of you are standing there, and the well of Bethlehem is right there. And I walk in, that's 3, your whole army. And I just storm right through, get the water. Because you got to fill it up. It takes some time. This wasn't like a water fountain. They literally had to hold the canister, what they was going to put in and let it bubble, look around. All right. Hey, everybody, how y'all doing? Just getting this water. And they ran back out. Can you imagine the fear? First of all, to see them running towards you just to get water. And when they came back to David to give him this water, David said, wait a minute, you really did this? Y'all ran all the way over there?
He poured it on the ground.
He poured it out.
Pour it out to the Lord.
He poured it out. He said, far be it for me to drink this water that you were going to shed your blood for. Now, in my younger days, I've heard many people preach on how to get money out of people's pockets. And I'm not one to stand up here to talk away or anything else, but it's a lot of people that work really hard for their lifeblood. The things that if a man came to me and said, this is all I had because I ran across the battlefield at work every day, and I'm going to just give it to you because you asked. It's a difference than someone who just says, I have this and I want to give it to you. You didn't ask for it. I didn't have to go through peril to get it. I want to give it to you from the onus of my heart. You see a difference when it comes to giving. And David understood that. Got a lot of people taking the lifeblood from a lot of folks out here. I'm not one to say that I'm against giving. I'm not at all. It should be done because that is how we as believers continue what we're doing for the Lord. Not saying that the offering, the money, no. It's the heart, it's the kindness, it's what's in us to say if I give $2, $10, $5, $6, $7, is in us. But by no means should anybody ask from the lifeblood from another man, because David proved that right there. Now, y'all can take that and untwiddle it how you want, study a little more, but that's what I got from it. Anybody get anything different?
That's a really strong point.
It is.
And you know, in the building of, somebody correct me what story was, they brought all this stuff, right? They prayed, and I think the leader had to tell them, which I was correct, to stop giving. Was he? Yeah, most. He said they brought all this, right? And what you just said described the New Testament truth of giving. Paul talks about it. Let every man give as his purpose in his heart. And unfortunately, it's not being taught, A. And a lot of times churches aren't teaching it because A, they don't know. But B, the other part is, in being selfish, if I teach you the truth, that tithing was never for the church. It was never for the church. If I teach you that, then you're going to stop giving. So my thing is, if the leader thinks that way, is the leader trusting God or is the leader trusting the people? I feel like we teach the truth of scriptures, which is what you just said about giving. We teach people that no, there's no amount. There's, as God purposes in your heart, you teach them that. You know God is going to take care of his body, his building, the things that we need. But it takes a leader submitted to God to teach that and walk in it, BD. So good for bringing that out in that story.
I guess just here to read the scriptures with everybody else. I enjoy doing it. I'm glad that somebody got something from it because I felt kind of lonely on that. No, no, but as like I said, as I study scriptures, I see things. But is there anything added? Because once again, the only last thing I would add from that chapter is David listed all his mighty men. And at the very last one, the very last name on that line is the one. I can mention all the other ones. We know David men is mighty. But in the mighty men, one name got mentioned. And that name is not that we have the story.
Uriah.
Uriah. David did not leave him out of his mighty men. He didn't. You're right. He did not. He did not leave him out. And I point that out because at the end of the day, David understood what he did to a mighty man. So I would not exclude his names from the book. You know, David is not excluding his name from the book to just, you know, let me erase that from history. No, Uriah was a mighty man. All right, so this is the final chapter of this, and then it is kind of like a little quick review, and then we'll be done with Samuel, and y'all won't have to hear me for a while unless I'm back in the back making comments, asking questions, because I'm gonna ask questions. Whoever up next, I got questions. I got questions before you even start. I don't even know what was the next one gonna be, but I got questions because I got so many questions because so much in here I still need to ask of others, maybe because they get a better understanding. All right, so David once again is getting ready to have an interaction with Joab. And this interaction goes a little different. Now, I think when I read the scriptures, it make me on one sense say, hey, this person, and then I'll turn right around and be like, but they're okay. Which tugs at my heart through the entire story, right? If you just focus on David, you'll miss some of the good that people are doing, some of the bad that people are doing. You'll miss some of the things that are being said, and you might ask a question like, is this a good thing? Is this person, I just seen him stab a guy on the side of the road. What's his motives? Why is he telling David to not number the men? Because David is going to number these people. David is going to number them folks, and he's going to make sure they get counted because he wants to know how many people he got, because Pastor Allen said it best. Wars are happening. Kingdoms are being built. And around them in that region, it was decided a lot of times through submission before fights even started by the numbers. There is no way I can beat an army of 1 million if I only have 400,000. Being facetious here with the numbers. Go look at Alexander the Great. A lot of the times he showed up with everything and everybody that he had on the shores of his enemy. Fighting in their own house. I got the numbers. So numbers matter. And David was starting to get a whiff of that. I need to see where my numbers are, especially after going through all this, fighting the Philistines, running a while. Israel is saying half of them going here. Judah's, I don't know. I just need to know who with me, because that's basically the question that he's really asking. Who is with David? You know, you'll hear people say, with David, with Joab, with this person. Who is with David? He wanted to know. And Joab said, hey, man, you might not want to number them people. God don't want your number. That's a bad thing. David said, no, go ahead and get the count. He said, you sure? He said, why would you want me to do this? He said, nope, go get the count. I want you to count everybody. It took him about 9 months and 20 days. And Joab gave the number to David. And there in Israel, there was 800,000 brave men who drew the sword. The men of Judah were 500,000. Judah was smaller. So we see the size of these kingdoms. So this division, you already see it's lopsided, right? All right. And the heart of David struck him after he numbered the people. And he said, what? I have sinned greatly in what I have done. But now I pray, take away my crookedness or your servant, this foolishness. All right. And then God told Gad, go talk to David. Go talk to David, give him some options. Let David know. He got two, he could either deal with this or deal with man. And David said, wait a minute. Do I want pestilence? Do I want famine? What do I want? He says, you know what? I've been on the run long enough, God, and I don't want to fall into man's hand again. I'm going to leave this up to you. So God sent an angel. And when he sent that angel, that angel said, oh, it's go time. He wasted no time. He was working his way through Jerusalem, and he got up to the threshing floor. And he was like, wait a minute, something got to do to appease this. Something I got to do. And he told him, hey, go see Arawana. That's how you say that. Arawana. Go see him. So David goes up there to see him. People are dying. I think we lost, 70,000 at that time? People are dying. And David gets up there and he says, hey, we need to stop this. I need to do something. I need to make a sacrifice. And he was like, hey, you the king. Come on in. Take whatever you want free. And David said, no, I have to pay for this. All right, well, take this. And he said, well, I need to slaughter. He said, well, let me go get you an ox. And he said, no, I need to pay for that too. And on that day, David made peace with God. He slaughtered the oxen that he purchased in the building that he purchased, and all was right with God that day. The famine ended. Raphael said, I believe they said Raphael, right? Raphael. Can't remember which angel they spoke of. Depending on what text you read, some of them just say the messenger, some say angel, some say Raphael. It all depends where you're reading that. And say he got to the threshing floor, and he was getting ready to finish the job, and God was pleased. And that is the last chapter. 1 second, Sam. I think we had a good time. Are there any questions before I kind of hit a recap? Are any questions? We talk about some things. I don't want to keep you longer than there's still some sunlight, but that's because days are getting longer. The sun stays in the sky a little longer. Any questions? I know it was a lot. I covered two really the whole scriptures is prolific. It tells you so much, but the two chapters I covered, that was a lot. It was a lot. And y'all actually rolled with me through the entire time. I think I may have lost one of y'all once or twice, due to some napping, but that's okay. I'm tired too. It's late in the afternoon, and but for the majority, you all were here with me, whether via internet, and I promise you, I enjoyed every minute, every second. Things I got right, got wrong, lessons I learned from the out. Hopefully, I was able to share with y'all. We see that we had a lesser king that promises us a greater king. We got to see some of the ways that the lesser king conducted itself that gave us remnants or visual of that greater king. We got to see how God dealt with his son, even the lesser king. We got to see how God dealt with him. We got to see the falls, the rises. As we go on, we'll get to see a little bit more of the people, the falls, the rises. But one thing through everything that we read in these last two chapters that is evident and proof that God was there every step of the way. And if I am to believe what John said in 1 John, it said that if he was there in the beginning, that means that God that we know that John spoke of is the same God that David walked with, talked with, and spoke with. So if anybody ever asked you what Jesus was, just say he was hanging out with David for a little while if you want to go read about it. Any questions, comments, or concerns?